Hello and welcome back to This Week in New Genre Books. My name is Amelia, and from Locus magazine, I'm about to tell you the top new science fiction, fantasy, and horror books being published the week of July 18th, 2023. If you're new here, what we do see is we tell you about all of the books that didn't exist like yesterweek, and now they exist this week. Not because we switched timelines or dimensions or anything like that, not as far as I know anyway, but because publishers like to put out all their new books on the Tuesday of every week, and so there's a fresh crop of books every week. Locus is the magazine of the science fiction, fantasy, horror publishing genre, and this is our booktube version of the magazine. I've got links for timing if you want to skip to your favorite category, be it science fiction, fantasy, or horror. Starting with science fiction books this week, we have 7 science fiction titles being published. From Colson Whitehead, we saw Crook Manifesto, out from Doubleday in hardcover, trade paperback, ebook, and audio. If it's not obvious what all these words mean, trade paperback and so forth, they're the editions that all of these books come out in, although you're readers, so I expect you to pick up information in context. Anyway, Crook Manifesto is an associational historical novel, a sequel to Harlem Shuffle, set in 1970s New York City, where ex-fence Ray Carney tries to stay on the straight and narrow as he deals with countercultural upheaval and urban blight. Colson Whitehead is the author of novels including Underground Railroad, which I loved, and for which he won the National Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize, and Whitehead is a recipient of MacArthur Fellowship, among other honors. From Yume Kitasei, we saw The Deep Sky, out from Flatiron in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a science fiction novel. A generation ship, the last hope of humanity looking for a new planet, is knocked off course by a bomb, and the only surviving witness struggles to find the culprit and clear herself of suspicion. C.L. Clarke, author of The Unbroken, said, "There are so many things to love about Yume Kitasei's debut, but I especially adored how real every moment felt. The politics of boarding school and our future world, the lapsed friendships and estranged parents, the guilt of surviving, of being chosen." In The Deep Sky, Kitasei puts us under the microscope, not in judgment, but with a fair and caring eye. She looks for the best in us. From Jamila Ahmed, we saw Every Rising Sun, out from Holt in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a historical novel of 12th century Persia, a retelling of the story of Scheherazade from 1001 Nights. But here, she not only tells stories, but also persuades her husband to join Saladin's battle against the Crusaders in hopes of making him get over his first wife's betrayal. V.V. Ganeshananthan, author of Brotherless Night, said, "Jamila Ahmed's Every Rising Sun is a beautifully imagined and fiercely feminist retelling of a cherished classic and an audacious new invention all her own." From Essa Hansen, we saw Etherea Grave, out from Orbit US in trade paperback and ebook. This is a science fiction space opera novel. Caden has finally been reunited with his sister Letta after 10 years on the run with his unique starship, and he's managed to convince his longtime enemy, Thray, to join his side. But the multiverse isn't safe yet. Thray's sister is still the most powerful being in existence, and she still wants to collapse their beautiful, diverse constellation of multiverses down to one. Now, Caden and his makeshift family carry the fate of all of the worlds in their hands. From Jayne Cowie, we saw One of the Boys, out from Berkeley in trade paperback, ebook, and audio. This is a dystopian science fiction novel. Antonia and Bee are sisters and doting mothers to their sons. But that is where the similarities end. Antonia had her son tested to make sure he didn't possess the violent M gene. Bee refuses to let her son take the test. She believes his life should not be determined by a positive or negative result. These women will go to any length to protect their sons, but one of them is hiding a monster. From Lauren Euro, we saw Under This Forgetful Sky, out from Athenaeum in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a young adult near-future science fiction novel. 16-year-old Rumi Sabzwari has spent his entire life behind the armored walls of St. Iago, which protect citizens of the Union of Upper Cities from the outside world's environmental devastation. But when rebels infect his father with a fatal virus, Rumi escapes St. Iago, desperate to find a cure. From L.L. McKinney, we saw Escaping Mr. Rochester, out from HarperCollins in hardcover and ebook. This is a young adult novel, a queer reimagining of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, with Jane Eyre and Bertha Mason saving each other from Mr. Rochester's horrifying machinations. Next up, horror, we have 4 titles in horror this week. From Silvia Moreno Garcia, we saw Silver Nitrate, out from Del Rey in hardcover and ebook. This is a horror novel mixing Mexican horror movies and Nazi occultism about a cursed, legendary lost film that awakens a woman's hidden powers. From the review in the July issue of Locus by Gary K. Wolfe. Montserrat Curiel is a skilled sound editor who finds it increasingly difficult to get assignments in the male-dominated film industry of Mexico City in the 1990s. Her lifelong best friend Tristan is a fading soap opera actor haunted by the accidental death of his girlfriend a decade earlier, for which he feels partly responsible. When Tristan moves into a new apartment, he discovers his neighbor is Abel Urueta, an almost forgotten director of a series of horror films in the 1950s, whose work is admired by both Tristan and Montserrat. Over a dinner which involves a lot of geeking out over classic horror directors like Todd Browning and Jacques Tourneur, Urueta tells them about a Nazi-connected German occultist named Wilhelm Ewers, who worked on the screenplay of Urueta's last unfinished film and who, influenced by the likes of Aleister Crowley and Anton LaVey, came to believe that movies could be used to amplify the casting of spells. Silver nitrate film stock, already being phased out in the 1950s because of its flammability, was especially effective because silver is a powerful conduit for spells. From Chuck Tingle, we saw Camp Damascus, out from Nightfire in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a horror novel about teens in a gay conversion camp, the debut horror novel from this celebrated, funny author of erotic and romance novels. J.R. Dawson, author of The First Bright Thing, says, "This book is for anyone who thought they were going to hell for being themselves." Chuck Tingle takes that fear and weaves it into a seamless horror that will keep you up at night, not only because it's got monsters, but because we've known those monsters. And yet it still proves love is real. Camp Damascus is a big hug to all of us who had to fight to find each other. From Sarah Flannery Murphy, we saw The Wonder State, out from MCD in hardcover and ebook. This is a supernatural thriller. 5 friends arrive back in Eternal Springs, the small town they all fled after high school graduation. Each of them is drawn home by a cryptic, scrawled 2-word letter. You promised. It has been 15 years since that life-changing summer, and now they need to know why Brandy called them back, especially when they vowed never to return. From E. Saxey, we saw Unquiet, out from Titan Books UK in trade paperback and ebook. This is a gothic horror novel with a seemingly unreliable narrator. Judith's life in 1893 London is upended by her father's death and the impossible reappearance of her sister's missing fiancé. Next up, fantasy, we have 5 titles this week. From Daniel Abraham, we saw Blade of Dream, out from Orbit US in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a fantasy novel. Kithamar is a center of trade and wealth in an ancient city with a long, bloody history where countless thousands live and their stories endure. This is Gareth's. Gareth Left is heir to one of Kithamar's most prominent merchant families. The path of his life was paved long before he was born. Learn the family trade, marry to secure wealthy in-laws, and inherit the business when the time is right. But to Gareth, a life chosen for him is no life at all. From Chloe Gong, we saw Immortal Longings, out from Saga Press in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is an epic fantasy novel inspired by Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra. Every year, thousands in the kingdom of Tallinn will flock to its capital's twin cities, San Heir, where the palace hosts a set of games. For those confident enough in their ability to jump between bodies, competitors across San Heir fight to the death to win unimaginable riches. From Adrian Tooley, we saw The Third Daughter, out from Hodder and Stoughton UK in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a young adult fantasy novel, a sweeping YA fantasy about legacy, betrayal, sisterhood, and politicizing emotion in the quest for power, all balanced by a slow-burn LGBTQ romance. Tooley is also a singer-songwriter who has released 4 indie folk EPs. From Serena Valentino, we saw Fire and Fate, out from Hyperion in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a young adult fantasy tie-in novel. The myth has been told for centuries. Brothers Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades waged a years-long war against their father Cronus and his tyrannical titans. Upon their mighty victory, Zeus split the world into 3. For himself, he claimed the sky and what fell below it. To his brother Poseidon, he assigned dominion over the sea. And to his oldest brother, Hades, would rule the underworld, while Hades tries to make the best of a lonely situation. Eternity proves a long time to be forced to live in a role, a domain, he never wanted. And the part of the story no one tells is that when your family treats you like a villain, it is far too easy to become one. From C.S. Friedman, we saw Nightborn, Coldfire Rising, out from DAW in hardcover and ebook. This is a science fantasy novel. A ship full of colonists arrive on a seemingly hospitable planet, only to discover that it harbors a terrifying secret. Soon the settlers find themselves caught up in a desperate battle for survival against the Fae, a natural force with the power to prey upon the human mind itself, bringing a person's greatest fears and darkest nightmares to life. From Sara Hashem, we saw the Jasad Heir, out from Orbit US in trade paperback, ebook, and audio. This is a fantasy novel inspired by Egypt. A fugitive queen strikes a bargain with her greatest enemy and becomes embroiled in a complex game that could resurrect her scorched kingdom or leave it in ashes forever. This is a debut novel. From Jade Linwood, we saw Charming, out from Solaris UK in trade paperback and ebook. This is a fantasy novel. Prince Jean-Marc Charming Arundel, known of course as Prince Charming, is handsome, well-mannered, brave, a peerless swordsman, a cunning tactician, and a liar, a conman, and a fraud. For years he has been traveling from one kingdom to the next, rescuing princesses and maidens, securing his place in their father's palaces, and then looting their treasuries, until a chance meeting of 3 of his victims set them on a course of revenge. Next up, collections and anthologies, we have 2 titles this week. From George R.R. Martin, we saw Wild Cards Pairing Up, out from Harper Voyager UK in hardcover and ebook. This is an original shared world anthology of stories about love in the Wild Cards universe. Authors include Gwenda Bond, Bradley Denton, Christopher Rowe, and Melinda M. Snodgrass. A jewel thief seduces a popular actor just so she can track down a long-lost treasure. A teenager trapped in the body of a giant snail attempts to win his love a la Cyrano de Bergerac. A man discovers his purpose in life after meeting a beautiful butterfly woman. A young hero who has been awarded the hideous name of Hero McHeroface finds some solace in the arms of an astrologer hiding her own unique powers. From Sean and McGuire, we saw Be Sure, out from Tor.com in hardcover and trade paperback. This is an omnibus of the first 3 books in Sean and McGuire's multi-Hugo and Nebula award-winning Wayward Children series. Join the students of Eleanor West and jump through doors into worlds both dangerous and extraordinary. Book 1, Every Heart a Doorway. Book 2, Down Among the Sticks and Bones. Book 3, Beneath the Sugar Sky. That wraps up this week. Thanks for spending some time with us. At Locus, we want to tell you everything relevant that's happening in the science fiction, fantasy, horror publishing space in this dimension or any others we happen to find while we're doing our due diligence to track down all of these books. Also, breaking news, I have started another YouTube channel in addition to this channel, which I'm presenting for Locus Magazine. My baby brand new channel is a guided meditation channel, and I write and record and present all of the material. It's called Misguided Meditations with Amelia. If you've ever wanted to relax to a guided meditation and found them all to be annoyingly serious, please give me a listen. One of my favorites so far is one I call Harness the Power of Delusion. Please check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes. Anyway, back to Locus Mag. Thanks so much for tuning in to hear about all the new books and stuff. Please subscribe if you haven't already. It helps us out a lot. And leave this video a like on your way out if you got something out of it. The magazine and YouTube channel are a labor of love. We are at Locus Mag or at Locus Magazine on most platforms. You can read more about the science fiction, fantasy, and horror field over at www.locusmag.com or support us on our Patreon. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. Come back and see us again soon, and we'll be here next week with more new books.